Have you ever thought about how big and complicated the world is? There's a fun word for part of that, sonder, which is this idea of, when you see a big group of people, or maybe you go to a big city or something like this, you look at them and you see each one of those people, each one individually, is experiencing a life as vivid and complicated as you, with their own passions and loves and interests and everything. And when you think about that, you just think, wow, the world is really crazy. But there's more than just people, right? There's like rocks and dogs wherever Ember is, and there's mountains and volcanoes and oceans and submarines, and there's outer space and going to Mars and the sun and other galaxies. And man, the world is so complicated. And then on top of that, we have our own things, our own businesses and lives and markets and all of these things that work together. And then even beyond those, the things that we kind of understand and are doing and are able to control, we also have stuff we don't know. And what's crazy is the sort of zeitgeist, the sort of situation right now is that now is the time to grow complacent. Now is the time where learning isn't useful, where exploring isn't useful, just min-max on whatever the current latest, hottest, newest LLM trend is. And that's how you'll find success. And I will say there is definitely success to be had in that vertical, especially if you're a shovel seller. Like, that's a really powerful place to be. I'm not trying to say that that's not a viable option. But there are at least, things that we don't know yet and that we don't have data for in our LLMs, and things that we can't predict with them or won't get right every single time. And no matter how many parameters you have in your model, and no matter how many zeros are in the check to build the data center, you still don't know some of the things. And so my encouragement, my sort of thing that I would say to do, at least maybe in addition, maybe not replacing exploring AI, we'll talk about that a little bit later, exploring with AI, but instead sort of thinking, what should we add to our tool belt instead, is curiosity. And what I want to say with it is, it's not just about technologies, but I'm going to start with a few examples from some technologies that affected my career, and then we'll talk about some other ones too. So the first one I want to talk about, which is probably the funniest one from my career, is that I was paid money to do things with NeoVim. I was paid at my last job at Sourcegraph to write, plugins for NeoVim because we were doing editor tooling. And also what's even funnier is before we switched into editor tooling, I was writing a project, and most of you won't be able to believe this, but it was a project in Rust with users, a lot of users, and with Treesitter, which was funny because for the past 2 years before that, I had been constantly being told online that those are useless wastes of time, that it's not useful to know, and that nothing valuable could come from it. I'm just spinning my wheels to feel good about myself. And then sure enough, I used it at my job and saved, my company a bunch of compute and better results and faster results and more accurate results. And so it's kind of funny because in both of those cases, sure, there's some aspect of like, TJ, that was just you just got like lucky with those, or that only worked for you. But that's kind of my point, which is that like everybody's story only works just for them. Right? It's not as if everybody else's story applies to me. Like, I'm doing my own story, you're doing your own story. You got to find what's going to work for you. And the way you do that isn't by just like listening to me tell you what tech stack is going to be the most popular in 2025, obviously OCaml, but like it's going to be by you finding out what works for you and finding out what you can do and applying those to the business. And so it's not just about technologies, of course. In those cases before, I found particular business problems by being curious, right? I found that we were timing out or getting bad P95s for a syntax highlighting request on certain file types. And why was that? Oh, okay, we're using this old syntax-based one that's like regex is. Oh, well, I actually know Rust and Treesitter. Like, we could make this really fast and really reliable. And so, okay, well, let's solve that and let's fix that problem for customers, right? Or the NeoVim plugin, same thing. We wanted people to use our editor tooling. People use NeoVim. I want to do that. And so what's powerful there is that those were things that was an intersection of technology I was curious about, as well as other, sort of other general interests that I had in trying to solve business problems. But it's not just, this is where I feel like a lot of people maybe, like from reading some of the comments in the last video, get confused with what I'm trying to say. It's not just about technology. I just give that example because those are easy to relate to. It's also about so many different aspects of being curious at your job. When I worked at Epic, a medical health records company, not games, I worked at a team called DataLink, and our job was basically to turn medical claims data into medical record data. So we would find out from your insurer stuff that happened, and we put that into your chart. And the way that it took to test when I first got there would basically take us like 1 or 2 days to test any change. And mostly that was because we had to load data into, a big data warehouse, and then it had to ETL, and then it had to get transformed, and then it needed to put in staging, and then need to go to stage 1. And you had this huge pipeline of a bunch of stuff that was going on. And I'm talking to QA, and I'm like, that seems really hard. That doesn't seem like the best way that we could come up to do this, right? It seems the best way that for a QA, that the tools that they had, but it seems like we could have better tools than that. And at the same time, because of general curiosity, I had been reading various parts of the code base, top to bottom, good strategy, by the way, and I had stumbled upon a really amazing terminal library that we had, as terminal input and stuff like this, as well as the ability to read and write Excel files in MUMPS, the language that we used at Epic. And all those things kind of happened at the same time, and basically I was like, I think I can build a testing framework for our QA staff that will let them write down the inputs and outputs in Excel, save those Excel files, fuzzy find over the huge list of Excel files we have to run particular test cases, and we can automate the entire workflow for them for this particular aspect of testing. And sure enough, it was possible, and we moved testing time from literally days to literally minutes. The amount of tests we could run increased drastically, and even the better part is now we had a way to basically regression test huge swaths of the code base. And I say that because the curiosity there is exploring with my coworkers about what the pain points of things that are going on right now and how we can solve that. It's so important. Beyond just, sort of like within my own company or within that, there are ways to be curious and explore and do new things all around you all the time that you might not ever realize what the implications are going to be. The example for me in this is while we were in Madison, my wife and I, we went to this thing called English Conversation Time. And basically it was a place for non-native English speakers to come and learn about American culture and what idioms are appropriate to say at work versus ones that you only should hear in a movie, and all these kind of problems. And we met every Friday night, and we met a lot of amazing people, learned a lot of stuff about people all over the world, and had an absolute blast. And we just liked doing it. We didn't know that many people in Madison, and so we just decided we'd give it a go, and we fell in love, and were there for the 2.5 years. As I was applying for different remote jobs, because I wanted to work remote and move back home so my wife and I could start having kids and we could be by our parents, I was applying to tons of places, getting rejected constantly because I was just a nobody Midwest kid with experience in a useless technology, kind of fresh out of school. And I finally got a call back from somebody, and a major factor in that callback was the cover letter that I wrote for them. And I went and I looked at the values that they said that they had as a company, and one of them was about empathy and meeting people and having compassion with them. And so I wrote about some of my experiences that I had while we were volunteering. And that was one of the reasons that they gave me a call back. How I got past the very first round of where I had been continually getting rejected, which was resume screen. The reason I bring that up is because you don't know what the weird little things that you try and do, the weird explorations that you have that nobody's expecting to matter or you just do for fun, how those can end up completely changing the trajectory of your whole life. That's NeoVim for me, that's streaming, you know. Primeagen tells me you should try streaming. I say that's crazy. You know, before I know it, I quit my job and I'm sitting in a tree. By the way, in case you didn't catch the joke earlier, tree sitter. That's why we're up here. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so finding those problems in business, finding ways to match those up in your life, or finding ways to make yourself unique through curiosity and exploration are essential, regardless of how much the LLM knows or how much the LLM can do. And so I'd encourage you to fight against that zeitgeist, right? Fight against that feeling of complacency or giving up on learning, and that you literally don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and you never know how some of those things are going to play out. A funny story too about this is my sister, she's studying computer science, she's still in college, and she's walking around a downtown near where we live, and she stumbles across an office for a software company. And she says, that's a cool building, they seem nice. And she goes in and introduces herself to the secretary, you know, explains to her she's at school, blah, 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 all this other stuff, right? And the secretary says, oh, that's cool, here, you should meet so-and-so. And she does a tour and she really likes it. And they say, hey, we're hiring interns, you should apply. She applies, gets the job. She literally did the 1950s meme of like walk in and get hired kind of thing. But you probably haven't done it. Right? Have you actually tried the 1950s meme? Have you been curious enough to explore what's around you and go shake someone's hand and try and pitch them on why you're unique? You should try it. You should be curious. You should see and explore and see if any of those things are going to do anything for you. And in all of these things, I'll just say it again, being nice is really important. So I'll just keep reminding you of that in most videos in case you haven't seen the other ones. And all of that being said, so we sort of zoom out to there's a bunch of stuff outside of programming that's important to be curious about, and it's really difficult to guess how it's going to play into your career or how you can angle your career into those things. If we zoom back in to think about technology and like programming in our jobs, the thing that I'm just like blown away by how few times I see this suggested is using LLMs to help you learn. Not to just do a task, but to help you learn. They're going to answer questions. And sure, sometimes they get the answers wrong, but you know what? Ask them for a source. Say, where did you get that info? Or why did you think that? Or how did you come to that conclusion? Which 5 thinkers thought that? Which software principle came to this conclusion? Which libraries would you check out to do this? And then you just like go and do those things. And then you maybe ask it, what's a project that I could do to build with this? And then you try and build that thing to get a better understanding of a stack. And the crazy thing is like the LLM just sits there. It's going to keep answering your questions and keep on being there all day. It's not possible to hire a personal tutor for $20 a month. But you can with ChatGPT. And like I said, sure, sometimes it's a little unreliable and everything else. But if anything, it's going to help you to learn critical thinking. Critical thinking in this too. And I just don't see the general recommendation for like how people are using AI is that they seed the thinking to the LLM instead of using your own thinking, being in control of the technology instead of the technology controlling you, and you being in the driver's seat, you telling the LLM what you want to learn, how you want to do it, and then exploring those things and actually gaining skills instead of just becoming, like I'd said before, an LLM with extra steps. And that goes for technology as well as bigger than technology, bigger than that, into marketing, into copywriting, into understanding how entrepreneurship works, understanding how to deploy things. There are so many things you can learn. And each of them is a skill that you don't know how they're going to combine later to solve a real business problem to make you unique and valuable. And so if you could see the future, you know, then maybe a bunch of these would be pointless. You could know exactly when LLMs are going to take over certain jobs, or the AI is going to be smart enough to do this, or when ChatGPT operator is going to be deployed enough so that you can like prompt inject people's emails to send you $5,000 in Bitcoin. Like, you could just do all of those things, but I don't have that skill and you don't have the skill either. So what's the next best thing we can do? The next best thing is to continue being curious, continue asking ourselves questions. And because of that, because I know that I will keep doing that, I can feel confident that I will be able to bring value to whatever place I'm at, whether that's as an entrepreneur doing something on my own, or whether that's as an employee. I can be curious about the technologies, learning new technologies or learning old ones better, right? I can be curious about the problems that we have, understanding our customer and their problems and how we can solve them better. I can understand my coworkers better, right? And figure out what problems they're having so that we can learn to ship better and faster and more reliably. I can learn there's so many things to learn, and you don't know how they're going to all play together, right? And so ultimately, right, it's curiosity plus perseverance that will make you valuable no matter where you're doing. And that's my encouragement to you. Don't grow complacent. Don't stop learning. Instead, ask questions and be curious, not just about technologies, not just about your hobbies, but about the whole business aspect and what you can do to solve problems. That's what I think will be great and helpful for your career. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but I got that dog in me.